Before the sun crests the horizon, the valley is already awake. Mist rises from the earth in silver threads, drifting across dark silhouettes of pine and spruce. The air is sharp with cold, yet beneath the frost-laced grass lies a restless heat, ancient, unseen, immense. Somewhere in the half-light, a low rumble echoes, not from thunder, but from the breathing ground itself. A sudden eruption splits the silence. Water surges skyward in a towering white column, steam billowing into the morning sky. Droplets catch the first light of dawn, scattering into a prism of fleeting rainbows before falling back to earth in a soft, rhythmic hiss. The scent of minerals hangs in the air, mingling with the fragrance of wet stone and forest. This is Yellowstone National Park, a land where fire hides beneath snow and water dances above magma. Across an open meadow, a herd of bison moves slowly through rising steam. Their heavy forms seem carved from shadow, survivors of ice ages and volcanic winters. Nearby, an elk lifts its antlers toward the pale sky, breath curling in the cold. Far off along a tree line, a lone wolf stands still, watching the valley awaken. Beneath it all lies a vast reservoir of heat, molten rock circulating miles below the surface, shaping everything above. The crust here is thin, fragile in places, alive with pressure. Hot springs shimmer in improbable colors, turquoise, amber, deep cobalt, like fragments of the sky trapped in stone basins. The earth exhales constantly here. It hisses, bubbles, and pulses. It is never truly still. Yet amid this raw geological power, there is tranquility. The Yellowstone River glides quietly through wide valleys. Waterfalls plunge into golden canyons carved by time. Alpine peaks stand distant and serene, their snowfields glowing in morning light. Yellowstone is not a ruin of ancient violence. It is an ongoing story, a meeting point of destruction and renewal. Fire shapes the land, but life returns, adapts, flourishes. As the sun rises higher, illuminating geysers and forests alike, the valley becomes a living canvas of steam and shadow, movement and memory. Here, the earth reveals its hidden heart, and we stand humbled upon it. Yellowstone National Park stretches across nearly 9,000 square kilometers of the northwestern United States, primarily in Wyoming, with smaller portions extending into Montana and Idaho. Elevated more than 2,000 meters above sea level, the park occupies a high volcanic plateau encircled by rugged mountain ranges, the Absaroka, Gallatin, and Teton ranges forming a dramatic skyline around its interior basins. At first glance, Yellowstone appears as a landscape of broad valleys, winding rivers, dense forests, and alpine lakes. But beneath this tranquil surface lies one of the most extraordinary geological systems on Earth. The park sits atop a volcanic hotspot, a column of intensely hot material rising from deep within the Earth's mantle. Unlike most volcanoes, which form along tectonic plate boundaries, this hotspot remains relatively stationary while the North American tectonic plate slowly drifts above it. Over millions of years, that movement has left a trail of ancient volcanic features stretching across southern Idaho, marking the path of the continent over the plume. Yellowstone represents the hotspot's current position. Over the past 2.1 million years, 3 massive volcanic eruptions have shaped the Yellowstone Plateau. Each eruption was cataclysmic in scale, ejecting vast quantities of ash and lava across much of North America. The collapse of emptied magma chambers formed enormous calderas, broad volcanic depressions that define much of Yellowstone's central region today. The most recent of these major eruptions occurred approximately 640,000 years ago, creating the Yellowstone caldera, a depression roughly 70 kilometers wide. Unlike the steep-sided crater of a typical volcano, this caldera appears deceptively gentle, rolling hills and forested terrain masking the immense structure below. Water and ice later sculpted the volcanic foundation. During the last ice age, glaciers blanketed much of the region, carving valleys, smoothing ridges, and depositing sediments as they advanced and retreated. When the ice melted, it left behind lakes and fertile basins. One of the park's defining features, Yellowstone Lake, rests partially within the caldera itself. It is the largest high-elevation lake in North America, its shoreline shaped by both volcanic subsidence and glacial erosion. The Yellowstone River flows from this lake, cutting dramatically through the landscape. Nowhere is this more evident than at the Grand Canyon of the Yellowstone, where the river plunges over towering waterfalls and slices into brightly colored volcanic rock. The canyon's striking yellows, reds, and oranges result from hydrothermal alteration, hot fluids chemically transforming the rock over time. Seismic activity remains a constant presence. Thousands of small earthquakes occur in the region each year, most imperceptible, yet reminders that magma and hot fluids continue to move beneath the surface. The ground itself rises and falls subtly over time, swelling as magma accumulates and settling as it cools or shifts. Yellowstone's geography is therefore not static. It is dynamic, shaped by fire from below, ice from above, and water flowing persistently through both. Mountains were uplifted through volcanic processes and tectonic forces. Valleys were carved by glaciers and rivers. Forests took root in mineral-rich soils born of ash and lava. In Yellowstone, geology is not a distant chapter in Earth's history. It is a living process, ongoing, evolving, quietly powerful. To walk its trails is to move across a landscape forged in eruption, sculpted in ice, and sustained by heat rising from the planet's depths. Beneath the forests and valleys of Yellowstone National Park lies a vast and complex volcanic system, often called the Yellowstone Supervolcano. It is not a towering cone rising above the horizon, but a sprawling caldera, subtle in appearance and immense in scale. From the surface, it looks like gently rolling terrain, thick pine forests, and broad meadows. But miles below, heat churns in slow, relentless motion. The term supervolcano refers to eruptions capable of expelling more than 1,000 cubic kilometers of material. Events so powerful they can reshape continents and alter global climate. Yellowstone has experienced 3 such colossal eruptions in the past 2.1 million years, the most recent about 640,000 years ago. That eruption emptied a massive magma chamber and caused the ground above it to collapse, forming the caldera that defines the park today. Yet Yellowstone is not a hollow cavern of molten lava waiting to explode. Modern imaging reveals a complex system of partially molten rock, much of it solid, interspersed with pockets of magma and superheated fluids. The heat remains, but it is distributed through layers of crust like a vast subterranean furnace. This heat gives rise to one of the greatest concentrations of geothermal features on Earth. Yellowstone contains more than 10,000 hydrothermal features, geysers, hot springs, mud pots, and fumaroles, accounting for over half of the world's known geysers. These wonders are powered by a simple yet extraordinary interaction. Water meets heat. Snowmelt and rainwater seep into the porous volcanic rock, descending deep into the ground. As it approaches hot rock heated by underlying magma, the water becomes superheated, sometimes exceeding the boiling point without turning to steam due to immense pressure. When that pressure is suddenly released, the water flashes into steam and erupts skyward. The most famous of these geysers is Old Faithful, whose eruptions have been observed for over a century. Though its timing varies slightly, its predictability remains a symbol of Yellowstone's rhythmic pulse. But Old Faithful is only one voice in a vast geothermal chorus. In the Norris Geyser Basin, steam rises in thick clouds from vents that hiss and roar. The earth here feels fragile, crusted with mineral deposits, trembling with hidden heat. Some geysers erupt unpredictably, sending water and steam hundreds of feet into the air. Others remain dormant for decades before awakening without warning. Hot springs offer a quieter spectacle, yet perhaps an even more mesmerizing one. The Grand Prismatic Spring radiates color, deep sapphire at its center, shifting to emerald, then blazing orange and rust at its edges. These vivid hues are created by thermophilic microorganisms, life forms that thrive in extreme heat. Each band of color represents a different temperature zone, a delicate gradient of biology shaped by physics. Mud pots bubble thickly where water is scarce, and acidic gases dissolve surrounding rock into clay. Fumaroles, essentially steam vents, whisper continuously, releasing vapors that smell faintly of sulfur. Despite its dramatic reputation, the Yellowstone supervolcano is carefully monitored. The U.S. Geological Survey tracks earthquakes, ground deformation, and gas emissions. Thousands of small tremors occur annually, most too weak to feel. The ground subtly rises and falls over time as magma shifts below. These changes are part of the system's natural breathing. A catastrophic eruption is possible in geological time, but unlikely in any human time scale. What persists daily is not apocalyptic violence, but steady heat, transforming water into steam, minerals into terraces, and invisible microbes into living color. Standing near a geyser basin, one feels the paradox of Yellowstone. Immense power expressed in cycles both violent and gentle. It is not merely a reminder of Earth's destructive capacity, but of its creativity, its ability to sculpt beauty from fire and water. Yellowstone's geothermal heart beats quietly, persistently, beneath every step. Yellowstone's climate is defined by altitude, latitude, and dramatic seasonal change. Situated high on a volcanic plateau, much of the park lies above 2,000 meters, creating conditions more reminiscent of northern Canada than the continental United States. Winter arrives early and lingers long. Snow blankets valleys and forests, often reaching depths of several meters. Temperatures plunge well below freezing, sometimes falling to -30 degrees Celsius. Rivers slow beneath ice. Wildlife adapts or migrates. In the coldest months, geothermal steam rises vividly against the white landscape, as if the earth itself resists the frost. Spring comes gradually. Snowmelt swells streams and rivers, transforming waterfalls into thunderous cascades. Meadows reappear in patches of green. Bears emerge from hibernation, lean and searching. Migratory birds return to wetlands and lakes. Summer in Yellowstone is brief but radiant. Days are warm, though rarely hot, and nights remain cool. Afternoon thunderstorms sweep across the plateau, feeding forests and nourishing wildflower blooms. This short growing season is a time of abundance. Elk graze in open valleys. Bison calves roam beside their mothers. Insects hatch in clouds above rivers, sustaining fish and birds alike. Autumn brings crisp air and golden light. Aspen leaves shimmer in shades of yellow. Elk bugle across misty meadows during the rut, their calls echoing through thinning forests. Soon, frost returns to the grass, and the cycle begins again. These climatic rhythms support a remarkable range of ecosystems. Alpine tundra crowns the highest peaks, where only hardy grasses and wildflowers survive. Subalpine forests dominated by lodgepole pine blanket much of the plateau, adapted to both fire and cold. Sagebrush steppe stretches across drier valleys, while wetlands and riparian corridors trace the courses of rivers and streams. Fire plays a crucial ecological role. The Great Fires of 1988 burned vast portions of the park, alarming observers worldwide. Yet in the decades since, new forests have risen from ash-rich soil. Lodgepole pines, whose cones open only under intense heat, regenerated in dense stands. Wildflowers flourished in newly opened meadows. Yellowstone's ecosystems are resilient precisely because they are dynamic. Snow nourishes rivers, fire renews forests, cold sharpens adaptation. In this high-elevation wilderness, climate is not merely a backdrop. It is an architect, shaping life in cycles of challenge and renewal. In Yellowstone National Park, life moves with the seasons, resilient, deliberate, and deeply intertwined with the rhythms of fire, frost, and flowing water. This is one of the last great temperate ecosystems on Earth where large mammals still roam, much as they did centuries ago. Across wide valleys and geothermal flats wander herds of American bison, the largest land mammals in North America. Their massive silhouettes, framed by rising steam, evoke a prehistoric world. Once hunted to near extinction in the 19th century, bison survived here in small numbers, making Yellowstone a critical refuge for the species. Today, they graze on grasses nourished by volcanic soils, their hooves turning earth that has known both lava and ice. Elk are perhaps the park's most abundant large herbivores. In autumn, their haunting bugles echo across the Lamar and Hayden valleys during the rut. Moose browse quietly in willow-lined wetlands, while pronghorn, among the fastest land animals in the Western Hemisphere, graze in open sagebrush country. Predators move with quieter intention. The gray wolf, reintroduced to Yellowstone in 1995 after decades of absence, reshaped the ecosystem in profound ways. By altering elk behavior and reducing overgrazing along rivers, wolves allowed willow and aspen to regenerate. This, in turn, encouraged the return of beavers, whose dams created wetlands that benefited fish, birds, and amphibians. The ripple effects, known as a trophic cascade, demonstrated the delicate balance within a living system. Grizzly bears and black bears roam forests and alpine slopes. In spring, they feed on emerging vegetation and winter-killed carcasses. In late summer, they search for berries and cutthroat trout. Bald eagles and ospreys circle above lakes and rivers, scanning for fish in cold, clear waters. The Yellowstone River and its tributaries sustain native Yellowstone cutthroat trout, a keystone species supporting birds, bears, and other wildlife. River otters glide through icy currents, while trumpeter swans nest in marshy shallows. The plant life of Yellowstone is equally shaped by adaptation. Lodgepole pine dominates much of the forested plateau. These trees possess serotinous cones that open only under the intense heat of wildfire, releasing seeds into nutrient-rich ash. Fire, once feared, is now recognized as an essential force of renewal. In higher elevations, whitebark pine clings to windswept ridges, its seeds providing crucial food for grizzly bears and Clark's nutcrackers. Subalpine fir and Engelmann spruce thrive in cooler, moist conditions. During summer, meadows erupt in color. Lupine, Indian paintbrush, arrowleaf balsamroot, and alpine forget-me-nots bloom in brief but brilliant succession. Even in geothermal zones, life persists. Thermophilic microorganisms flourish in hot springs, painting pools in vibrant gradients of gold, green, and orange, proof that life adapts even to boiling water. Yellowstone's biodiversity is not accidental. It survives because of scale, connectivity, and protection. Migration corridors extend beyond park boundaries into the greater Yellowstone ecosystem, allowing species to move with the seasons. To watch a wolf crest a snowy ridge or a bison calf take its first unsteady steps is to witness continuity, an ecosystem functioning with remarkable integrity. Here, predator and prey, forest and flame, river and meadow exist in dynamic balance. Yellowstone is not simply a sanctuary for wildlife, it is a living web, sustained by complexity and time. Long before Yellowstone became a national park, it was homeland. For at least 11,000 years, indigenous peoples traveled through, hunted within, and held spiritual connections to the lands now known as Yellowstone National Park. Archaeological evidence reveals obsidian tools crafted from volcanic glass sourced within the region, materials traded across vast distances throughout North America. Tribes including the Eastern Shoshone, Crow, Apsaluki, Blackfeet, Nez Perce, Nimipu, Bannock, and others maintain deep cultural ties to Yellowstone. For these nations, the geothermal features were not curiosities or scientific wonders. They were sacred places, woven into oral histories and spiritual traditions. Hot springs and geysers were understood as powerful manifestations of the Earth's spirit. Certain areas were visited for healing. Others were approached with reverence and caution. The dramatic landscape, mountains, rivers, valleys, was part of a living cosmology, not an untouched wilderness but a homeland rich with meaning. Seasonal migrations brought indigenous communities through the plateau to hunt bison and elk, gather plants, and quarry obsidian. Trails crossed mountain passes long before European explorers arrived. Knowledge of weather patterns, wildlife behavior, and geothermal hazards was passed down through generations. In 1872, when President Ulysses S. Grant signed the act establishing Yellowstone as the world's first national park, it marked a milestone in conservation history. Yet it also resulted in the displacement and restriction of indigenous peoples from lands they had used for millennia. The concept of wilderness, central to the park's creation, often ignored the presence and stewardship of native nations. In recent decades, there has been growing recognition of this legacy. Collaborative efforts between the National Park Service and affiliated tribes seek to incorporate indigenous perspectives into interpretation, conservation, and decision-making. Cultural sites are acknowledged. Oral histories are preserved. Tribal voices increasingly shape the narrative of the park. Yellowstone's story is therefore not only geological or ecological, it is human. It is a story of deep time and living memory, of tools shaped from volcanic glass, of prayers offered beside steaming springs, of resilience in the face of displacement. To understand Yellowstone fully is to recognize that its valleys were never empty. They were known, named, and respected long before they were mapped. Beneath the steam and stone lies a cultural landscape, one that continues to endure. In the early 19th century, whispers of a strange and fiery wilderness drifted eastward across the American frontier. Trappers and mountain men spoke of boiling rivers, spouting water, and canyons painted in impossible colors. Many dismissed these stories as exaggerations, tales stretched by isolation and imagination. Yet the rumors persisted. In 1869, the Folsom Cook-Peterson expedition ventured into the region and returned with journals describing geysers and waterfalls beyond belief. 2 years later, the Washburn-Langford-Doane expedition of 1870 conducted more systematic exploration. They camped near erupting geysers, measured thermal features, and gave names to many landmarks, including Old Faithful. Their accounts sparked national curiosity, but words alone were not enough. In 1871, the Hayden Geological Survey, led by geologist Ferdinand V. Hayden, brought scientific authority to the region. Crucially, the expedition included photographer William Henry Jackson and painter Thomas Moran. Jackson's photographs, stark black and white images of towering waterfalls and steaming basins, offered visual proof that this land was real. Moran's dramatic paintings captured its grandeur in sweeping color. These images traveled to Washington, D.C., where lawmakers saw, perhaps for the first time, a landscape unlike any other in the nation. On March 1st, 1872, President Ulysses S. Grant signed the Yellowstone National Park Protection Act into law. With that stroke of a pen, Yellowstone National Park became the world's first national park, land set aside for the benefit and enjoyment of the people. It was a revolutionary idea. In an era defined by westward expansion, mining claims, and railroad development, Yellowstone was protected from private ownership and industrial exploitation. It belonged not to a corporation or individual, but to the public. The early years were challenging. Poaching, vandalism, and lack of infrastructure plagued the park. The U.S. Army was eventually assigned to manage and protect it in 1886, laying foundations for modern park administration. In 1916, the creation of the National Park Service formalized federal stewardship of America's growing system of protected lands. Yellowstone became a model for conservation worldwide. The concept of preserving vast landscapes for ecological, scientific, and public value inspired similar parks across continents. What began as rumors of boiling water and painted canyons became a global movement, rooted in the recognition that some places are too extraordinary to exploit. Yellowstone's creation marked a turning point, a declaration that natural wonder deserved protection not despite progress, but as part of it. Today, Yellowstone National Park welcomes millions of visitors each year. Families gather along boardwalks to watch geysers erupt. Photographers wait patiently for wolves to appear along the Lamar Valley ridges. Campgrounds fill during summer months beneath star-filled skies. Tourism brings both opportunity and responsibility. Carefully designed pathways protect fragile geothermal crusts from damage. Rangers educate visitors about wildlife safety and environmental stewardship. Seasonal road closures preserve winter habitat and reduce disturbance. Beyond its role as a destination, Yellowstone functions as a living laboratory. Scientists from around the world study its geothermal systems, mapping subtle changes in ground elevation and seismic activity. Biologists monitor wolf packs, bear populations, and migratory corridors that extend far beyond park boundaries. Climate researchers analyze snowpack levels and shifting vegetation patterns, seeking insight into broader environmental trends. Yellowstone offers rare continuity, an ecosystem largely intact, where natural processes unfold on a grand scale. It allows researchers to observe how fire regenerates forests, how predators reshape landscapes, and how geothermal heat sustains extremophile life. In the modern era, Yellowstone stands at the intersection of wonder and knowledge, a place where curiosity deepens appreciation and science strengthens protection. It remains not only a sanctuary of beauty, but a center of discovery. Even a landscape as vast and powerful as Yellowstone National Park is not immune to modern pressures. Climate change is reshaping the rhythms that have long defined the plateau. Winters are, on average, shorter. Snowpack levels fluctuate, altering the timing and volume of spring runoff. Rivers warm earlier in the season, affecting native Yellowstone cutthroat trout and the species that depend on them. Alpine ecosystems, finely tuned to cold conditions, face gradual shifts in vegetation and habitat. Wildlife that roams beyond park boundaries encounters fences, highways, and expanding development. Elk, pronghorn, and bison migrate across a patchwork of public and private lands, where conflicts sometimes arise over grazing and land use. Predators such as wolves and grizzly bears, though protected within the park, face complex management challenges once they cross invisible borders. Invasive species present another threat. Non-native lake trout in Yellowstone Lake have reduced cutthroat trout populations, disrupting food webs. Park biologists have responded with intensive removal programs, working to restore ecological balance. Yet Yellowstone's story is also one of resilience and active stewardship. Scientists continuously monitor seismic activity, wildlife populations, and climate patterns. Fire management policies now recognize wildfire as a natural and necessary force rather than an enemy to be extinguished at all costs. Collaborative conservation efforts extend beyond park lines into the greater Yellowstone ecosystem, protecting migration corridors and critical habitat. Tribal partnerships bring indigenous knowledge into land management practices. Education programs foster awareness among millions of visitors each year. Yellowstone endures not by accident but through vigilance. Its survival depends on a delicate balance between access and preservation, curiosity and caution, human presence and wild autonomy. As evening settles over Yellowstone National Park, steam drifts upward in soft silver veils. Bison silhouettes fade into twilight. The distant rush of a waterfall blends with the whisper of wind through pine. Beneath the stillness, heat continues to circulate. Ancient, patient, immense. Yellowstone is a land shaped by fire and renewed by ice, sustained by predators and prey, remembered by generations who have walked its valleys in reverence. It reminds us that power and beauty are not opposites, but companions. Here, the earth reveals both its strength and its fragility. To witness Yellowstone is to feel awe. To protect it is to accept responsibility. In its steaming basins and wide golden meadows lives a promise that wild places can endure if we choose to let them.